And welcome back to another episode of Locked On Chiefs. And this is a crossover episode with Locked On Raiders. And it is my boy Q. And thank you so much for being on here, Q. I really appreciate it. We are looking forward to talking about this game on Monday Night Football. Chiefs versus Raiders. It is always a great game. Thank you for making Locked On Chiefs and Locked On Raiders your first listen every day. Be sure to go check out maybe Locked On NFL or Locked On NFL Draft. Q, how excited are you for this game, the Raiders versus Chiefs on Monday Night Football?
Man, it doesn't get any better than this, right? Monday Night Football, it's Arrowhead Stadium. It's prime time. Week 5 gets wrapped up this way. The old rivalry gets renewed, and I know it hasn't been much of a rivalry as the Chiefs have dominated it for quite a while now. But still, man, you get the old Raiders and the old Chiefs together. It's always fun. So I look forward to it, man. It's going to be fun.
It's definitely going to be fun. I am looking forward to this game. There is so much to talk about, but I do want to tell you about our sponsors today. Crossover Thursday is presented by our friends at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is so much fun and is easy to play. No competing with other players, just you versus the projections available. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. It can literally take less than 60 seconds to enter. It's that easy. We love PrizePicks, and we know you will too. First-time users can receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code Locked On. All right, Q, let's jump into this. What is the story that you were looking at right now with the Raiders going into this game?
Well, I'll say the biggest storyline for the Silver and Black, in my opinion, is they've got to find their identity in the red zone. They're really good between the 20s. They're really good at getting to the red zone, but more times than not this season, they're cashing in with a field goal. And as you know, the Kansas City Chiefs, their offensive scoring power is way bigger than field goals. You're not going to beat them with Daniel Carlson getting 14 or 15 points on Monday, right? That's not going to happen. So what the Raiders have to do is find a way to get into the end zone early and get into the end zone often. So I think that really, honestly, that's probably the biggest storyline for this game. How does Josh McDaniels hit the right buttons? How does he get Devonte Adams? How does he get Darren Waller? Potentially Hunter Renfrow is coming back from concussion. How does he get him loose? How does Derek Carr thrive in the red zone? Does Josh Jacobs start running the rock? I know Kansas City's been playing really well against the run game. So, what can the Raiders do in the red zone is going to be probably the biggest question that head coach Josh McDaniels is asking himself right now. The players in the locker room asking themselves right now, how do they get 7 out of trips offensively instead of 3? That, in my opinion, is going to be the biggest storyline. But for the Chiefs, what are you looking at?
I don't know that there's another storyline that could be bigger than Kansas City's in this regard of what team is this? What is the reality of what this team is, what they can be? You look at what they did week 1, they destroyed the Cardinals. You look at what they did week 2, they beat the Chargers in what I think was a really good game. And then week 3, they just lay a complete egg with the Colts. There's no other way to put any other spin on that. They laid an egg, and then they go back and they beat the Buccaneers. And yeah, it was a 10-point game at the end, but that game was never that close. Kansas City, controlled the ball the entire game. They ran for 190 yards. They were up 2 scores after their second possession, and they never relinquished a 2-score lead. It was a phenomenal game by Kansas City. So the question I have, and I think the biggest question for this Chiefs team is which game really represents what this team could be? Because obviously it's not the Colts game, or they wouldn't have been able to play like they did against the Buccaneers.
Yeah.
But you look at what they did against the Chargers. They still played up to their competition enough to win the game, but they didn't win it it wasn't convincing. And then you look at what they did to the Cardinals. So that's my question right now is, what is this team? Who are they going to be going forward? Because let's not forget, they have a tough remaining schedule. Their next 3 games, they have the Raiders, they have the Bills, and they have the 49ers. That's going to be rough.
Yeah.
And the Raiders game is a division rivalry. Kansas City has always had trouble with the Raiders at times. And this is one of those scenarios where after what we saw Kansas City do with the Colts, you got to be wondering, especially with the Bills coming to town next week, is Kansas City going to overlook the Raiders? I'm not saying they should. I'm just saying the reality of what has happened to this team. Is that something they're going to be doing?
I mean, it's very possible, right? You just never know. And so as far as that identity and who is that team, from your opinion, from what you've seen covering the team like you do, what do you think that the identity should be? Who do you think this team should, like? How do they butter their bread the best?
Obviously, the offense is going to run through Travis Kelce, and I think that that's going to be really the focus going forward. Is it's going to run through Kelce, and you're going to have complementary weapons. I think the thing that really showed in the Tampa Bay game is Kansas City has the ability to run the ball. I don't think
Right.
anybody expected them to put 190 yards rushing on the Bucks. And then you look at how their defense is playing. They only allowed 3 rushing yards against Fournette, and I understand. Sorry, -3 rushing yards against Fournette. And I understand the Bucks didn't try to run the ball a lot, but -3 yards is -3 yards.
Still
He
negative
carried
three
it
yards.
right.
Yeah.
He still carried it more than a couple of times. So I think that their defense is playing better than anybody was expecting at this point in the season, especially me. I think that with the injury to McDuffie and Gay being suspended, I was not expecting the defense to be able to do what they've been doing. And yeah, they allowed 31 points to the Buccaneers, but let's be fair about it. They were also playing prevent defense most of the second, even the first part of the first half and all of the second half.
Let me ask you this, because we talk about the defense and what they've been able to do. And going back to my point of what I thought the Raiders' biggest storyline was going into this game about scoring touchdowns as opposed to field goals. What have you seen from the Chiefs so far in the red zone? How have they been able to hunker down and kind of keep guys out of or keep teams out of the end zone and forcing them to kick field goals?
I think it's just solid team defense, and they're getting after the quarterback when it matters most. Spags has been somebody that has not been blitzing in the past several years as much as you would expect him to, and then all of a sudden this season he's really started to turn that on. And I'm not saying he's blitzing in the red zone as much, but the reality is that when you blitz at different times during the game, it really builds up to different areas of the field, and you're in a situation where everything speeds up in the red zone. So I do think that plays into it. I also think that you just have to look at the defense and say they're playing better run defense than we ever expected. And I think that's one of the things that has really got them to the point where they can be a team that can be formidable in the red zone, because one of the biggest things that you have to your advantage in the red zone is you shrink the field that you have to cover pass wise. So you can put more guys around more spaces. But if you can't stop the run, that doesn't matter as much. Kansas City is now able to at least stop the run for the most part, which I think is really helping them.
Yeah, I mean, under 70 yards a game rushing, like how the hell does that happen? Right? I mean, like the Raiders just started to find their identity on Sunday against Denver, putting up a bunch of yards on the ground. Josh Jacobs went for 144. Hell, even Derek Carr went for 40, right? I mean, they put up a hell of a performance on the ground. And then all of a sudden you look at the Chiefs run defense, you're like, wait, hold on. They're only giving up 60-something yards a game. What in the world? So that could end up being a big factor in the red zone if the Raiders are wanting to score touchdowns, and maybe the Chiefs aren't going to allow them to run the rock. Have you felt like they've been pretty solid in the red zone, or do you think that there's a few areas, a few ways that maybe the Raiders could kind of exploit them in the red zone?
I think there's always going to be things you can exploit. And I think the biggest thing that I've seen from Kansas City at times, and it's in the red zone a little bit, but it's also just outside the red zone. Mike Williams, Mike Evans, those types of big body wide receivers, the Raiders don't have specifically that type of guy. They do have a Darren Waller who I think can go and do a lot of those types of things, though. So I think that's going to be a concern in the red zone. Chiefs have struggled against tight ends, and they don't have Willie Gay in this game. I think that's really going to be something that's going to hurt. And obviously, they have Devonte Adams. We can talk about that here in a little bit when we start getting into matchups. The one question I want to ask you, and I know this wasn't your biggest story, but what have you seen so far from Josh McDaniels so far as the Raiders head coach?
He's been kind of calm, cool, and collective, right? He hasn't seemed to be panicking at all. I thought that he was going to be the guy that pressed all the buttons, all the correct buttons that really got this offense humming. And I thought that in the red zone, really, he was going to thrive because he's done really well in New England, but it hasn't really clicked so far. So I think he's still trying to find himself as well. I don't think it was bad like a lot of Raider fans thought it was going to be when Josh McDaniels took over. Like, oh my God, Patriot West, here we go. I think he's been a pleasant surprise, but when you get off to an 0-3 start, all of a sudden the sky's falling and he's the worst coach in the world. But picking up that victory on Sunday against the Broncos was something that was a must win. They had to find a way to win that game. They did. Now, of course, it's a huge task going to Kansas City trying to pick up a win on Monday Night Football, that crowd there at Arrowhead. But, I mean, I feel like they have a puncher's chance just because of their talent, but they've got to play 4 quarters and they got to put it all together or else, and like I said, score touchdowns, not field goals, or else it's going to be a long day at the office. Simple as that.
It absolutely will, and I think that's a big key. They got to score touchdowns. Whether or not they can get that done is going to be a question. And when we get back, we're going to get into the matchups that we're going to be talking about that could really change how this game is played out.
No doubt about it. Before we do that, though, I wanted to ask you a few questions and tell you about our good friends at Elias Digital Solutions. And, you ever wish that before every NFL game you can get up to date and accurate information before you place a bet or lock it in your fantasy lineup? Well, now you can with the Elias Game Plan app, the ultimate sports betting and fantasy companion for the NFL, NBA, MLB. It doesn't matter if you're part of a fantasy tournament, placing bets, or just a huge sports fan, stats nerd. Elias Game Plan has everything that you need. It's a sports app for the most trusted name in sports stats, the Elias Sports Bureau, official statistician of U.S. Pro Sports League since 1913. You see and hear them and trusted facts all the time from ESPN, your local radio broadcast, TV broadcast. They have everything that you need. They have it covered. Matter of fact, you can check out everything Elias. And, one of the reasons that I really love them, they have the key injuries. Key injuries is something that will play a big factor in games. If you're betting on them or if you're playing fantasy, you got to know about the key injuries. And that's one of the things that I go to all the time when it comes to Elias. I got to check out who's injured, who's in, who is out. Take this NFL season to the next level. Download the Elias Game Plan app today. Choose from 3 game plans when you subscribe: weekly, monthly, or annual. But I can get you 25% off your first month when you choose the monthly subscription. Just use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL25. Find Elias Game Plan sports betting in the App Store or Play Store today and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL25.
Thanks again for making Locked On Chiefs and Locked On Raiders your first listen every day. Make sure you check out NFL Key Predictions every Friday on Locked On NFL. Locked On's local experts give you the inside scoop on the 5 biggest games of the NFL weekend, including Sunday night and Monday Night Football, which is where Kansas City and the Raiders will be playing, plus betting advice from the field's leading experts, BetOnline. Follow NFL Key Predictions every Friday on Locked On NFL, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, this is where it really gets fun for me because you start looking at matchups for this game. Kansas City versus the Raiders. Obviously, these teams know a lot about each other, but there's new pieces going into this game that haven't been there in the past. What are you really keen on? What is your biggest key matchup for this game?
We touched on it a little bit in segment number 1. We were just talking about storylines, and really it's that Chiefs defensive line. I didn't know what they were going to look like coming into the season. And, they've been able to get after the quarterback. They've been able to stop the run. What Steve Spagnuolo's been able to do with the defense and, having a corner blitzing and getting to the quarterback and actually leading the team in sacks, that's impressive as well. And I know he's not on the defensive line, but still it's a disruptive force on to the opposing team's offenses. So I think that really when it comes to the Raiders, like I said before, they just started to establish their identity, in my opinion. Has run Josh Jacobs, has run Zamir White, whoever they feel like the key player could be that week. And now you're facing a Chiefs team that has a really strong run defense. I think that the Raiders need to be able to run the rock and be a solid contributor in the run game for multiple reasons. One, because it gets their offense going. 2, it keeps Patrick Mahomes and company on the sideline. Now, the problem is if you run the ball really well and go on a 9-10 play drive and take off 8 minutes off the clock and you only score 3 points, and then the Chiefs go down with 1 minute and score a touchdown, guess what? You're losing that game. So they've got to find a way, like I said, to get into the end zone. But I do think that there's got to be a heavy dose of the run game. And Josh Jacobs is playing in a contract year. Didn't get that 5th-year option picked up. He's been running hard. He's been running behind his pads. He's averaging like almost 5 yards a carry. I mean, everything he's been doing has been solid so far this year. Up until last week, though, he didn't have a lot of carries. It's like they just went away and abandoned the run game too early and even cost them a game, as my opinion, in that second week of the season against the Cardinals when they were up 20 at halftime. They just abandoned the run game in the second half, and the Cardinals came back. So I think that that's the identity of the Raiders is run the rock, run the rock, run the rock. They're playing solid defense, but if they can't establish that run game, it might be a long day. The Chiefs' edge rushers and their defenders can just pin their ears back and get after Derek Carr, and he's not the fleet of foot guy. I mean, he ran a little bit last week. I'll wait to hold my judgment, see if he does it again, see if he's going to continue to do that, if that was a one-off thing. But, if the Raiders can't run the ball, man, I mentioned before, it could be a long day for the Raiders in general.
Yeah, that's a big question. And you start looking at what this game is going to mean for both teams. Divisional games are always going to be big in this division and really anywhere in football. Quite honestly, my biggest matchup that I have to be curious about in this game is how the Raiders are going to stop Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce was almost a one-man wrecking crew against a very good Tampa Bay defense in the first half last week. And he's had some very big games against the Raiders in the past couple of seasons.
Yep.
They did very well in the last time they played against Travis Kelce. I think they kept him to like 30 yards, but he's been over 100 yards the three previous games before that. So the question I have is, how are they going to stop him? How are they going to slow him down? Because the reality of this Chiefs offense right now is they are spreading the ball around so much. If you can't stop Travis Kelce, you're going to have a hard time stopping other people.
Yeah, that's a big question. Kelce has been a Raider killer. I mean, he really has. Every time the Chiefs play the Raiders, there's a way for Travis Kelce to get off, right? And I know on the radio I was asking folks like, who's the one player that you're most concerned about on Monday night, and everyone to a T was like Travis Kelce, Travis Kelce, Travis Kelce. So Jonathan Abram is the guy that the Chiefs, they look for him out there. They look for number 24 and they go after him. It just seems like every game they target him. I don't know how Patrick Graham is going to defend the Chiefs. He had success somewhat against the Chiefs while he was a Giants defensive coordinator. I think that the Raiders defense has more talent than the Giants did. And like I said, he was pretty successful against them, but still lost the game. But it was just, kind of slowed down the Chiefs offensive attack a little bit. So I'm interested to see how Patrick Graham really defends. I'm thinking that maybe a guy like Jayon Brown, who's a linebacker they picked up from the Tennessee Titans, maybe he's contributing. Maybe he's helping. I think he's a little bit better in coverage, but nobody's going to stop Travis Kelce. So really the big question is, how do you try to slow him down and make a guy like Juju Smith-Schuster beat you, or make a Marquez Valdez-Scantling beat you, or, maybe the two running backs who, we talked about it before, they're using them more than I've seen Andy Reid use a running back in a very long time. So, I mean,
Right.
there's so many ways for the Chiefs to go out there and execute their offense. But if it's Travis Kelce that I'm just thinking about, I'm thinking a guy like Jayon Brown, maybe even Trayvon Merrick, the second-year safety out of TCU. Maybe he's a guy that's tasked with trying to match up with Travis Kelce. And really, again, because Patrick Graham is new and this is the first year he's been the Raiders defensive coordinator, maybe they go Nate Hobbs. Maybe they put a guy like Nate Hobbs, who's the best corner that the Raiders have. Maybe they put him on Travis Kelce and say, look, that's your assignment for the day. I'm not saying that's what he's going to do, but maybe that could be a matchup. I mean, obviously, Travis Kelce is a problem. So they've got to be able to solve that problem. And so whatever Patrick Graham could do in the lab to try to slow him down is obviously what he's thinking about right now. So there's a few different options that he can go with. I just don't know which one he's going to go with, and I don't know which one's going to work, if any.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. I do think that that's always going to be a key playing against this team is how you stop him. But
Yep.
what you said is also accurate. If you stop him, then you have Juju, then you have MBS. We have a guy like Sky Moore now
Yeah.
that started getting some playing time last week. McCole Hardman wasn't even involved in the offense, and they scored 40 points last week, and they ran the ball like they did. So that's going to be something to watch as well. Who's your other big matchup that you're looking at in this game?
I want to see how Devonte Adams, Darren Waller, and Hunter Renfrow are defensed, right? Because Devonte Adams is always going to get the majority of the attention. So I feel like that gives Darren Waller an opportunity to go ahead and maybe have a one-on-one matchup and give him something that he hasn't had with the Raiders in a long time, if ever is a one-on-one matchup. Just give him an opportunity to beat somebody. Not saying he's going to win every time, but it at least gives him an opportunity to. And look, I spent a lot of time talking about Travis Kelce. And Darren Waller is always in the same conversation. It's always Kittle, Kelce,
Yep.
and Waller, not necessarily in that order. And it really doesn't matter what order you put them in, but we know that those are the upper echelon of the tight ends in the league. So if he wants to be in that conversation, I think he needs to have a big game, right? Show why he deserves to be in that conversation with those other guys, including Travis Kelce. And so how can he thrive? If Devonte Adams is going to get double teamed, or they're going to shadow him, zone him up, whatever they're going to do, bracket coverage. I mean, I think he's seen everything. If they're going to do that with him, then Darren Waller's got to say, okay, don't worry, I got this. I'll step up and really, be that X factor. And then if Hunter Renfrow returns, then you have a three-headed monster. Can Carr get the ball to those guys? Can they, get yards after the catch? Can they just thrive in the offense is going to be the big question. But, if everyone's got all attention on Devonte like they always do, I look for Darren Waller to step up and try to have a big game.
And you basically stole one of my biggest matchups, and that is going to be Devonte Adams, because that is the matchup that scares me probably the most when it comes to the Raiders. I like what Darren Waller brings. I agree with you. I think he belongs with Travis Kelce in that upper echelon of tight ends. I love what Hunter Renfrow brings. The question is he going to be able to play? We don't know that at this point.
Right.
And so, if he's able to play, that obviously gives them somebody that's going to be helpful for their offense. But this offense, and it hasn't so far from what we've seen. Week one, they fed the ball to Devonte Adams a lot. They targeted him a lot. They fed him the ball a lot. weeks 2 and 3 didn't really seem to be that way, and they tried to go back to him a little bit more in week 4. Although I think it's the young corner Surtain did a very good job in
He
Denver.
did.
Um,
Yep.
so I'm curious to see how Kansas City deploys their defense specifically against Adams, because
Mm.
you're absolutely right. Waller can have his own day, but if you can get to a point where you can stop Devonte Adams, I think you're going to be in a better position on defense to be able to slow this Raiders offense down and keep them to where they're only scoring 3 points. Or, if they get a touchdown or two, it's not, 4 or 5 touchdowns. It's 1 or 2 touchdowns, which if you're Kansas City in this game,
Right.
you're always expecting that you're going to score over 25, 30 points. So 1 or 2 touchdowns isn't going to kill you. It's allowing 4 or more that will
Yeah.
get you in trouble. And so I think Adams is my big key, mainly just because he is such a difference maker as a wide receiver. I haven't yet seen it to the extent that I expect to see it in his time with the Raiders, but he's adjusting to a new system. And yeah, he's been with Carr in the past, but it's been a long time.
Right.
Chemistry takes a while, and I will say this: one thing that has really stood out to me is I think Patrick Mahomes is one of the best QBs in the NFL. We've already talked about that on our crossover episode this summer,
Yeah.
but even he is struggling with getting chemistry with some of his wide receivers. He finally started to get on the same page with MVS in the Bucs game, and that is a big thing going forward for this offense. And the only reason I mention it is because I do think that Carr and Adams are close to getting on the same page. I just don't know that they're quite there yet.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%, and I think that we've seen that. I think Carr's trying to figure out how to use Adams. I think Josh McDaniels is trying to figure out how to use Adams, right? I mean, I said the identity of the Raiders, I believe, is the run game, and they got away with that or get away from it because I think they were trying to make sure that Adams was featured and, oh, yeah, look how big he's going to be in this offense when they didn't have to do that. They could have just allowed the game to come to them. And so I think that it's still a feeling out process. The first 4 games of the season was probably a feeling out process, but and now if you don't know how to use them by now, I mean, you're kind of in trouble. So yeah, that's going to be obviously a big matchup. How do you think, just with your knowledge of the team, how do you think that they go about trying to defend Devonte Adams?
I would think they're going to double cover him. I don't know. We haven't seen Kansas City really send Snead at somebody directly on a regular basis, and maybe Devonte Adams is going to be that guy that they're going to decide. Okay, Snead goes with him wherever Adams goes. I just don't see Kansas City doing that with their defense that they have right now. So I'm figuring that they're going to double cover him, and wherever he ends up, he's always going to have safety over the top, and you're going to try to keep everything in front of you. If you can, the biggest key with a guy like that is if you can keep it to where he has to be perfect. And what I mean by that is he is breaking a tackle or two on almost a every possession basis,
Right.
and he's getting first downs. That's what's going to matter, because we saw it against the Broncos. They just stood up and threw him the ball, and he got 7 or 8 yards.
Right.
That's great as long as he hits that every single time and he catches the ball. And I'm not saying he won't. I'm just saying they've got to be perfect in those types of plays. If you miss 1 or 2 of those, that's how drives stall, and that's going to cause you issues on offense. So to me, I think they double cover Devonte Adams, and I think that that's how they try to stop him, and they try to make Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller beat him. And if they double Adams and put Snead in the slot on Renfrow, I think that actually could work to the advantage, because Renfrow hasn't played either, so he's
Right.
not going to be up to game speed, I don't think, his first game back if he plays this week.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't played since week 1. So, I mean, week 2, excuse me. He got the concussion week 2 against the Cardinals on that last play of the game, as a matter of fact. So, yeah, he's been out of it. I mean, gut feeling tells me he's going to play just because, again, saw him out at practice on Wednesday, but who knows? Obviously you got to clear all the protocols, and they're going to be very safe moving forward. All the teams across the league.
Yeah, I was going to say, with everything going on with
Yes.
concussions, absolutely, especially considering it almost became an issue on Sunday Night Football with the Chiefs and the Buccaneers and Cameron Brate.
Right. Yep.
But when we get back, we're going to get into our predictions for this game, what we're thinking is going to happen score-wise, and what else we think could go on in this game. All right, let's go ahead and just dive right in. I am excited because I love these games. I love divisional games. Who do you have, Q, in this game?
Man, it's a tough one. It really is. I mean, I feel like everything is favored towards the Chiefs coming off the big victory over Tampa Bay. It's in Kansas City. It's Monday night. All the fans are going to be lathered up probably starting at noon. I mean, it's going to be such a raucous environment. As I hear it and understand, apparently people are still talking about the bus trip around the stadium, still talking
They
about
are.
stomping on the logos. I thought the logo thing was one thing. I thought that, okay, they're going to talk about that. I thought the bus trip thing was long gone, but apparently that's still being talked about, and that's okay. I mean, hey, whatever works. So my gut feeling, as much as I think that the Raiders can compete with the Chiefs, I feel like that they have the weapons. My gut feeling just tells me that Kansas City is just going to have too much going for them at home on Monday night, that the Raiders aren't going to be able to hang with them and be able to win this game. I think it'll probably be a lot different week 18 at Allegiant Stadium when the Raiders actually have their home field advantage, and who knows what they'll be playing for at that point, because it's a long way away. But this game just feels like a tough one, especially since the Raiders aren't very good in the red zone. Like, if they had been clicking in the red zone, again, the Chiefs are number one in the red zone. They have 15 touchdowns through 4 games. The Raiders are number 2 in the red zone for scoring. They score every time they get there. Problem is that they score more field goals than they score touchdowns. And so that is the big issue right there. If they scored as many touchdowns, when they go to the red zone, more touchdowns than not, I would say, yeah, I think they're going to win this game. But man, just with that issue in the red zone, I just don't. I think that's too much for the Raiders to overcome, especially with the Chiefs, who can score so quick, fast, and in a hurry. So I think that the Chiefs will get the win. I know that they're favored, I believe, by BetOnline.net. Probably by, I think they're 6.5 or 7-point favorites. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's about right. That's about accurate. I think they get a touchdown victory over the Raiders on Monday and drop the Raiders to 1-4 on the season, and they improve to 4-1 on the season. What are your thoughts?
I have to. Obviously, I think that Kansas City's probably going to win this game, and it's not necessarily because I think that they're so much better than the Raiders. I think my big thing, and you said this specifically in what you were talking about, Kansas City is on a different level right now than the Raiders, and I don't mean that the Raiders can't get there. It's more of the Raiders aren't there right now. Their offense isn't clicking, like you said. I mean, they're running the ball well, but they're not scoring the points when they need to. And I think the biggest thing that is always something that plays a factor into these games is you have to wonder how a head coach is going to get into the red zone and look at playing against Patrick Mahomes and say they've got a 4th and 1 at the 6-yard line. Are you going for it? Or are you going to kick the field goal? Are you going for 7?
Gotta go for it,
Right.
right?
No, I understand that, but that's my point.
Right.
Yeah, but that's my exact point
Right.
is Kansas City has actually done well against those short yard situations this year.
Mm.
But even if they hadn't, you put him in. It goes back to what I talked about with Devonte Adams. You put him in a position where one simple failure, one small failure by somebody causes you to lose out on points, and that adds up over time. And I think that could play into this game. And you really are going to learn a lot about Josh McDaniels in this game, because I think he's going to be in those scenarios where maybe it's not red zone. Maybe it's, they're at the 25-yard line and it's 4th and 1. Are you kicking a field goal or are you going for it? What is this coach going to do when he gets put in that scenario, especially if they get down early and they're down, 10 points or, even just a touchdown? Is that going to change how he's going to play? I do think, like you said, Kansas City wins this game. I do think that it's after what happened with the Colts, they're going to be focused into this game. I don't think they're going to overlook the Raiders. It is a divisional game, so I think it's going to be closer than I would maybe expected otherwise. But I think Kansas City wins. I'm going to go 34. I'm going to go 34-24. I think it still could be a 10-point game, but it's really going to depend on how this game is played and what the score is throughout the game. Is Kansas City, do they jump out to a lead early? Right. And if they hold on to the football and they don't turn it over, I think they're in good shape.
Well, and that's the other thing too. If the Chiefs get out to like a 14-point lead, then the run game's gone, right? I mean, you all of a sudden you have to drop back, and that's when the Chiefs could pin their ears back. Now, I mean, as I've told many people, and I've said it all week on the podcast, I believe the Raiders could win this game. There's no doubt. I believe that they could win it. I think they have all the talent. On Sunday, they put together the first 4-quarter game that they played all season. Most of the times it's 2 quarters. It's the first half or the second half and not the whole thing. So I'm concerned. Can they put together 4 quarters? If they could put 4 quarters together, this might be a barn burner down the stretch, right? We might have a fantastic Monday Night Football game
Could
where it
be.
comes down to the wire, right? But I haven't seen it consistently enough for them to put 4 quarters together where I think, yeah, they're going to do it. Where I can say confidently, like, yeah, Chris, they're going to put 4 quarters together and they're going to score in the red zone. They're going to get touchdowns, not field goals, and they're going to make this a hell of a game. They just haven't done it consistently enough for me to say that without like really just like kind of being on a hope and a prayer, right? So that's
Right.
that's just where I'm at, and I don't want to be disrespectful and just be like, oh yeah, they're gonna go ahead and win the game because they got Devonte Adams there. Well, I just like I said, I want to see some consistency, and yet we haven't seen that just yet.
Well, I think the other thing that plays into that is you also have a situation where you don't know what you have with the head coach yet. At 1-3, you just simply don't know. Is he going to be a guy that can get this team going in the right direction? And I'm not saying he can't. I'm just saying,
Right.
is he going to be that guy that can consistently get them to be better than maybe what they've played in the past? I do think this Raiders team has talent. I do think that they could be successful in the NFL. And Derek Carr is, I think, a better quarterback than a lot of people give him credit for. But it's getting the team to play together and getting the team to play with chemistry and getting the team to understand a new offense and a new defense and getting all that to mesh together in week 5 against a division rival that knows pretty much your roster inside and out. I'm not going to say they know everybody, but they know a lot of the people on the Raiders. And yeah, scheme's going to be different, but they still know the players. And I think that's going to play into it as well. So I'm fascinated to see this game. I'm fascinated to see what
Yeah.
Kansas City does in this game and how they do it. And I want to see what the Raiders do because I did think that the Raiders were going to be better than their 1-3 record that they have right now.
I agree, and this is actually the first game where I feel like that they're going to lose, right? I mean, this is the one. I mean, going against the Chargers, I thought they could win that game. Then they lost, but I felt pretty confident they can come back home, go to Arizona or have Arizona in the house and beat them, and they were up 20-0, and then they lost that game, and then I was like, okay, well maybe Tennessee. And Tennessee wasn't playing up to the level of the Titans that we saw last season. So I thought, oh yeah, they could definitely go to Tennessee and get this win. And then they didn't. And then I was like, okay, Denver, they have to win this game. And, because
Right?
Denver hasn't gotten off to a very good start either. And so they did get
Nope.
that win. So I was like, okay, cool. But like I said, just because it's been so inconsistent with this team, and what I mean is just the consistency of playing throughout the whole game. That's why my level of concern. This is actually the first time this season I really felt like, okay, this is probably going to be a loss unless they put it all together and they have a stellar game.
And that is definitely going to be something that we're going to have to watch. Like I said, I'm really excited about this game. I love Monday Night Football, and I love division rivalry games, mainly because I can think back to when I was, in 3rd or 4th grade, and Andre Rison caught a touchdown pass to beat the Raiders.
Oh my God, that was in Oakland. I remember that game. That was
Yep.
over Eric Turner.
Yep.
Rest in peace. That was who was that?
Yep.
Elvis Gerbach
I
threw
think
that.
it was. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Elvis Grbac, and
It
that
made me
is one of
sick to my
that is
stomach.
probably the game that launched my fandom into the Chiefs as much as I have it right now. So, I remember those games. I remember the division rivalry games. I've taken my daughter to Raiders games. It's just a phenomenal thing to go see and to be able to experience. A little sad I can't go to this Monday Night Football game, but I'm looking forward to it. Thank you all for making Locked On Chiefs and Locked On Raiders your first listen every day. Now make the second listen this week. Peacock and Williamson, the NFL show. Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson give you their expert NFL analysis in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. Q, I've really enjoyed this. I always enjoy talking to you. I always feel like I learned some more about your team. Good luck on Monday nights. It's a little different because obviously we don't have football to talk about this Sunday, but I cannot wait for Monday Night Football.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, man. I always enjoy hopping on and, getting a little intel behind the curtains a little bit with the next opponent. And, of course, Kansas City, Monday Night Football, Arrowhead. It's going to be a lot of fun, man. So enjoy the game. I'll enjoy the game, and we'll see how it all shakes out.
Thank you all for listening today. Go subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already. Go hit the like and the little bell to get a notification. And go check out the Locked On Raiders podcast. Q does a great job over there. Thank you all for listening today. We will be back on Friday with a little bit of an extra episode because we don't have our preview this week since we'll be doing it on Monday. Thank you again, and we will talk to you tomorrow.